Hello, I'm Mick Fealty. I'm founding editor of Slugger Cato, and I would like to welcome you to this first edition of the Slugger Cato Project. Now, in the history of Roman democracy, Cato the Younger was famous not for seeking power, but for relentlessly challenging it. He was a symbol of integrity, independence, and, above all, defiant courage. He was a citizen who demanded the highest standards from his government, even when he knew that his fight for clarity was often in vain. So our much more modest project seeks to bring some of that spirit to the Stormont Assembly. And to that end, we will be interviewing backbench MLAs, even councillors, to explore the role that they play in scrutinising power. But we'll also ask, are they just lobby fodder? Are they even just fodder for their own party leaderships? Or are they, as we need them to be, the last line of defence for democratic scrutiny? The Northern Ireland government system often fails to deliver, and in part, that may be because the necessary close-up and uncomfortable scrutiny is simply not being applied. Our local media often looks elsewhere for its news, but we're here to try and challenge that direction of travel. So the Slugger Cato Project seeks to inspire and yes, even demand rebelliousness, independence, honesty and courage from our backbenchers, not as a moral virtue, but merely as the essential tool to challenge and fix a floundering governmental system. So in these interviews, we're looking for that spirit of Cato. We may not find it, of course, but we have to look. So now let's hear from our very first MLA witness, the DUP's North Antrim MLA, Paul Frew.
So I was always community minded, always involved in various ways in the community, groups, law and orders, that type of thing. And eventually you get a tap on the shoulder and you're asked to join the party. And the DUP was the party that best suited my political philosophy. Didn't agree with everything, of course, and nobody should actually agree with everything in a party. But it was definitely the best vehicle for me. So I joined the DUP in 2000. Became a councillor in 2005 and then was co-opted up here to the Assembly in 2010 to replace Ian Paisley Jr. when he took his father's seat in Westminster. And I haven't looked back since. There's a massive privilege being an MLA because you actually get to change legislation, but you can actually help people on a daily basis in the constituency work. So we help about 100 families a week. I'm very proud of my team and the work that we do in our constituency offices, whether that be hip replacements, waiting lists, mental health issues, domestic violence even, potholes, window replacements, good homes, all sorts of things, planning, housing executive, getting people houses. So all of that is good work and we change the world a family at a time. But up here you can change the laws and that's a great privilege. And so I have managed to change laws up here that's to the benefit of the people. And that's the big privilege. So I've changed laws around domestic violence, stalking. I made amendments to bills that the Department of Justice has brought in. I brought in tougher sentencing for assaulting ambulance staff to bring them into line with police officers and firefighters, assaults on them, which was only right and proper. I brought in the Child Protection Disclosure Scheme, which is really vital for parents protecting children. They can go to the police station and get a disclosure on someone who's acting suspiciously around their children. And if there's a risk, if that person is a risk, that parent deserves to know and will be told. So that's really important. And I've also brought in, along with collaboration with other MLAs from other parties, we've brought in measures that modernised the licensing regime of legal firearms. Something that dogged the police for a long time was the fees around licensing, and we really bring in compromises that the industry was happy with, the sport was happy with, and the police were happy with, the Department of Justice too. So we were able to make that legislative change in the Assembly, and that's by working with other MLAs, which is really important. Yeah, well, you won't get any legislation changed or brought in here without collaboration and partnership. The nature of our politics, the splintered nature of our parties, numbers, you have to work with other parties and you have to build up relationships with other parties and you have to convince them what you want to push through by legislation is the right course of action. So it can take quite a long time, but if you work with like-minded people in the other parties, then that makes it much more easier. And so that is the big skill, that's the great skill of politics, is making sure, the art of politics is convincing other MLAs that what you're doing is right, and so you get a majority in the Assembly voting for it. So I've been an MLA, a member of the Legislative Assembly, since 2010, but I was only in the executive. I was only in the government for 3 weeks, and that's the time I was a minister. So I'm an assemblyman, a member. So it's very important that we distinguish between the executive, which is the government, and the parliament, which is the assembly. And the parliament's role is to hold the executive to account, no matter what party you're in, no matter who the First Minister is, no matter how many ministers you have in the executive. You must scrutinise and hold the executive to account in that assembly. And I must say I'm pretty good at that, I enjoy that, and that's my role, and I will fulfil that to the best of my ability. So of course you have to be loyal to your party and you have to stay within the party policies. But what's wrong with trying to change your party policies? What's wrong being in there in the first instance, asserting yourself into saying our party's got the wrong policy, we're going the wrong direction, let's flip this on its head, let's go a different direction. Parties should be self-evaluating like that all the time. I think it looks bad if you're in there doggedly defending a minister, because quite frankly the minister should be big and bold enough to defend themselves and their department if they see fit. They should also challenge their department. So is it not a bit silly, an MLA, a backbencher of an assembly member, defending a department that the minister could well be challenging themselves? So, and of course the very important aspect of this is, if the department's going down the wrong way, if it's wrong-headed on a policy, surely the MLA wants to try and find that early and change that in order that there's no harm done to the public out there in Northern Ireland. We need to make sure that each one of our departments are running effectively, efficiently and smoothly, with no bad policy and no wrong-headed policy that's going to do harm to our people. Well, I suppose there are many times when I think policies are wrong, departments are going the wrong way. And there's many times when I've seen departments give ministers the wrong advice. That's not just my opinion, I think that really that is the case. And in one instance, I suppose, is ROC payments, where the Department of Economy was going to keep the ROC scheme open for a further year when the Tories closed it in GB. That would have created a run on Northern Ireland, with companies coming in to build wind farms and solar farms in order to get a ROC payment. The ROC payment would have lasted for 20 years. And that would have meant that that socialised scheme would have only been, instead of the UK-wide socialised scheme, it would have been a Northern Ireland socialised scheme, which meant that our industrial bill payers, or heavy industry, or manufacturing, would have had to have paid in the region of 500 to 900 million on their electric bills in order to furnish the ROC scheme for Northern Ireland. And that would have decapitated business, because we already pay some of the highest energy costs in Europe, competing with Italy. So that was one instance where I was able to convince my party, convince the minister and convince the department that this was wrong-headed. And with some deliberation by the minister, about 4 or 5 months, he came to that conclusion too, that I was right. And so he made a speech in the Assembly which stated that he couldn't keep the scheme, even if he wanted to, he couldn't keep the scheme open for a further year. And it was regrettable that the Tories closed the scheme a year early, but yet he would have had to abide by that. It's a bit like the socialisation of welfare. If we change, if we differentiate, it costs us in our block grant. It would have been something like that, only bill payers would have had the burden of paying. So cogs turn very slowly in government, and sometimes that's right, but sometimes it's so frustrating. I was an electrician by trade, foreman for 20 years out of 10, so I seen things build up around me. I was pressurised every day, and I just sometimes don't see any speed in governance. And so it's really important that when you had direct role ministers flying in the Monday, flying out on the Tuesday, there's no doubt about it, civil service ran departments and by extension governed Northern Ireland. Now we have some great civil servants and we have had over the history of the state. But one of the most important ingredients of democracy is accountability. So how can that be accountable? How can a top civil service, no matter how good they are, be accountable to the public? How can a direct role minister elected in a constituency in England, Shire or in Glasgow, how can they be accountable to the people in Northern Ireland? So that's where that's what the prize was in the devolved statement or settlement. So we now have locally accountable ministers making decisions in departments, and we have local MLAs elected to serve in the Assembly to scrutinise those departments and those civil servants and those ministers. So that's the prize. That's the prize. We get accountability along with democracy. And to be honest with you, the two can't coexist. I think you have to push and pressurise departments. I think you have to stand them to account. I think the work in the committees is really, really good, because that's when you really scrutinise the department and the committee that you're in. And I think that's, no matter who the minister is, no matter what party has what portfolio, in a committee you have to work as a team to scrutinise that team, to make sure it's working effectively, efficiently and serving the people of Northern Ireland. And if it doesn't do those three things, then what's the point? So things have to change, and it can be the committees and the work you do in the Assembly chamber that really pushes that and brings that to focus. So it's hard. I get disgruntled at times. There's mistakes that are made. Some good things come out of government, but we have to make sure that government here is best served to serve its people. So I think everyone should look at the party that best suits them. They won't get a perfect fit. It would be weird if you did. But the best thing about being a party is you can actually assert your influence on that party and change and amend policy as you see fit. You won't always get everything your own way, but if you're robust enough and determined enough, you can make change in a political party. If you can make change in a political party, you can make change then in a wider assembly. And I suppose the difference between an independent or even a single member compared to being a party is that instead of walking down the street to make change, you're actually driving down the street. You've a set of tyres, you have an engine there pumping away, and you can be more effective and more efficient. And I think it's a better vehicle in order to make change. Yeah, the silo mentality in the executive is a problem, and it's something that we need to scrutinise and make better. But the public out there would see politicians in a TV studio. They would see the debates in the Assembly where it can be quite robust, and I enjoy that actually. But what they don't usually see is the work, the painstaking work of detail, which is so important to accountability and democracy, that is taking place in the committees. And it's that work that I think people need to see more of, because they'll not only see the professional side of being a full-time elected politician, scrutinising, but they will also see how relationships are built up. And if you work as a team in a committee, you'll serve the people far better. And so that means working in a team with members of parties that you don't agree with at all, parties that you don't even like, but you build up relationships with individuals. And that is a godsend when it comes to trying to influence people in the future with regards to future laws, changes in legislation, and how this place works. And so it's vitally important that I build up relationships with every single MLA in this house that I can actually influence. And so you won't get things your own way all the time, but if you can actually go to somebody and say, look, here's what I'm planning to do, here's why it's going to be a benefit to my constituents and your constituents, can we work together? And if you've built up a relationship with that person, that MLA, no matter where they're from, what party they're from, you have a chance. You have a chance to make a difference to people's lives, and that's the art of politics.